Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be talking about Kubernetes Engine infrastructure and service-oriented monitoring with Equifax. My name is Ruxanda. I'm a product manager on Google Cloud, focused on cloud monitoring. And today, my guest is going to be Vipul. He is a lead SRE at Equifax. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to be focusing on three main topics. We're going to start by discussing SLO monitoring principles. We're going to do a Q&A with Vipul from Equifax to really understand how Equifax has adopted SLOs and the digital transformation journey that they are undertaking. And then at the end, we're going to have a demo. Patrick, which is our engineering lead on cloud monitoring, is going to give us a demo of how we can use SLOs and SLO monitoring to monitor our GKE fleet of microservices. So let's start thinking a little bit about what are the principles behind SLO monitoring. I know probably many of you have heard about SLOs. And when we think about SLOs, it feels like we are talking a lot about numbers and targets and goals. We talk a lot about how many nines do we have and how important it is to collect these numbers of nines, almost like badges of honor. We talk about how important it is for us to have the best reliability out there. And a lot of people really try to strive extensively to reach that 100% reliability goal for basically every single microservice that they own. And that's what I want us to start with. From the point of realizing that this conversation is not about numbers. It's not about getting every single microservice to its maximum availability possible. And it's 100%, it's the wrong target to begin with. And surprisingly enough, even though this is such an incredible engineering-driven experience, what we were going to talk about today is actually language. Because what is more important for us than anything else is to figure out what is a common language that we can give every single person within our organization the ability to communicate towards the same success goal. So let's think about the business process. You start with a concept. You end up building requirements with your product team, with your marketing team, with your sales teams. You end up defining the goal and the business goal for your product. You start engaging with your engineering teams and build the development of that product. You start working and engaging later on with your operations teams, and your operations teams wants to ensure that what we've built, it's reliable and it's scalable and it's performant. And then you start taking the product to market. The problem is, the way that I told this story is that it feels like this is a set of sequence steps, and you have to introduce all of these people into the process one by one. But what is important for us is that we actually need to have the business, the development, and the operations team to collaborate together on defining what does success look like for the organization as a whole. And when we talk about success, it has to be a single metric that all of these teams and all of these people get behind. These metrics really need to reflect what the end customer experience is all about. We need to think about the CUJs, how the end user uses our product. And we need to ensure that we are building the right measurement of that CUJ, and we make this measurement understandable and available to everyone in the organization. So when we talk about defining success, SLOs gives us the ability to create a common language across business development and operations to understand what is important for the organization and how to instrument this into trackable metrics. But because this is a common language and it's a new language across the org, we're going to have a few new terms we're going to need to get familiarized with. So these are the three core terms of service-oriented monitoring. So what is an SLI? An SLI is a service level indicator. Think about this as a metric under a threshold. It is a measure of what success looks or feels like. An SLO is a service level objective. And the difference here, think about the metric that you build your SLI on and you attach a goal to it. So you have a fraction of your successful interactions that you're interested in. Let's say you have a retail website and you care about measuring customer happiness with your checkout service. You know that a lot of your financial team is really interesting to make sure that people can check out and pay for the items that they care about. So we know that that is a cornerstone of the experience. We know that we want the service to be available, but most importantly, we don't want our customers to be frustrated. So here we're going to start thinking about how fast do we want our users to experience this page. And it could be a matter of seconds. So now we need to know what share of customers should experience this. So maybe we have a target where we can have a business goal that at least 95% of all of our customers have to open the checkout cart service and visualize the data and the items in that checkout cart in less than 5 seconds. And that is the goal. So as you can notice, we're not talking about nines. We are talking about the end customer experience. And that's a really important clarification to make as we are thinking about how to measure the end customer experience. And the last item here, probably all of you are already familiar with, because an SLA is a service level agreement. And that takes the SLI, the metric, attaches the goal, but then it has some consequences around it. So for example, this is a contract that you make with your external customers, where you tell them that we have an availability, our product will be available for this amount of time under these constraints. And if we don't meet those requirements, then we will offer you refunds. So a lot of companies have implemented SLAs in these contracts with their external customers. What we are trying to get them to understand is we already have the underlying, under an SLA, there is an SLO itself. And these are really powerful metrics that can transform the organization and bring your business, your development, and your operations into a single frame of mind. So now that we have this new language, I think it's important for us to see what is a great example of how to take this language and put it into practice. And Equifax has been an incredible advocate within their own company of adopting SLOs. And I am extremely happy and privileged to have today Vipul join us. He is an SRE lead at Equifax, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the SLO journey there. So Vipul, please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your role, and tell us a little bit about the Equifax architecture.
Thanks, Ruxanda, for having me. It's been a pleasure. So about my role, I've been with Equifax 14 years. Equifax has been great. I've been started as a developer 14 years back, served in various roles. And then most recently, I've been working as a SRE for one of the Alliance data fabric within Equifax. A little bit about Equifax. Equifax is a global company. We are a data analytics and technology company. We operate into 24 countries. And the platform that I'm responsible, my day-to-day role as an SRE, is an enterprise data lake pattern, and Equifax is on this digital transformation journey, and Google is our platform of choice to enable us for the transformation journey. So as part of that journey, I'm responsible to implement the enterprise data lake pattern. Primarily, the capabilities are ingest, store, process, analyze, and serve our analytics API. So primarily, most of our services that we leverage from Google are Kubernetes, data flow. Google helps us to improve our security posture. I mean, it's a security first mindset we have at Equifax. So Google helps us on that. And then on operation tools, we are using cloud logging and monitoring to give us the visibility into the systems that we are running. So primarily, that's in a nutshell what we do. And the services and the capabilities that we are serving are pretty much following the container as the abstraction and microservice architecture towards it.
Vipul, you mentioned microservices. That's going to pique my curiosity. Please
Yeah.
tell me, how do you monitor the health of your microservices?
Great question. So at the beginning, we were working off our on-prem data center, and we didn't have container orchestration platform as part of the infrastructure. So it was a little hard to get a visibility into our applications, and operations was a little bit tough. And also in our pre-cloud, public cloud world, our engineering and operations were working in silo. So our first approach was, let's lift and shift our application and then, progressively move to a microservice architecture. But now that we have decided to embrace our digital transformation with the public cloud, we are not just doing lift and shift. We are really thinking as re-architecting the application and using the better cloud native tools. The tools that are, what we had in data center are no more working out for us. And we really need a tool which gives us good observability into when we are moving our applications and workloads into public cloud. So if you don't know, what we have to observe, because there's too much newness about the public cloud. So what you end up is you can start with 4 golden signals. As part of SRE best practice, just take 4 golden signals and then work your way towards the SLOs. I feel that's a good starting point.
You mentioned SLOs. Tell me more a little bit about the journey behind why you adopted SLOs, and why do you think are kind of the main benefits for Equifax to start using SLOs?
SLO has been a great concept and one of the best practice that I learned. And it's a single language across our engineering team, product team, marketing, finance, sales. It helps us to talk with a common goal, right? So it helps us to prioritize our effort. And once we have that kind of single language to work across the organization, it's much better. Otherwise, you have a lot of meetings with analysis paralysis. You go through a churn, but you really don't have a direction. So to give a opinionated meeting a direction, SLO helps us. And it really becomes a data-driven decisions that allows us to figure it out where we should prioritize our efforts and investment. And also for SRE, it is very important, using SLO as a guiding principle, when to wake up and when to not, and what really is impacting the revenue, which is important for business. So I feel that's pretty a common theme within Equifax, is to embrace SLO as a single language.
It sounds like there are a lot of benefits, but be honest with me, what was the hardest part? Because this seems too good to be true.
True. SLO's concept great, but to put it in execution is definitely hard. The way I kind of articulate the SLO engagement is really think about as the overall meal and not the ingredients. So when your customer comes to your restaurant, they're really expecting a meal to be served. They're not really interested into how you got the ingredients. What was the logistics behind getting all the ingredients so that you can prepare the meal? Customer is really interested in your product. When you present the product, what it should look like. That is really the focus of it. And SLO helps you to measure that exact thing. What is the feeling about your product? And that is the key. So it's very easy to focus on the ingredient and lose the focus on the meal. So that's the hardest part of it. Now, what helps us to bring the focus is the mindset. And you need the whole organization, because if you start it just as an engineering project, you're going to have a lot of churn because you have not brought your other stakeholders along with you who has the say in your SLO. So that is the other thing. You want to focus on the mindset. And frankly, in Equifax, we started doing this, and we brought Google CRE, who is the Customer Reliability Engineering Group, helps us to execute SRE best practices in Equifax. So that engagement also helps us.
So looking back, this has been a journey. It didn't happen overnight. Is there anything that you would have done differently, knowing what you know today?
Well, For me, personally, when I took the SRE role, I wish I knew SRE much earlier. I did not know much about it. So I had to do a lot of research. I had to read some books. I had to go and do a lot of reading about it, because building a software and a product that works at a global scale is not easy. You really need to have a engineering mindset to an operational problem. And since my background was a software engineering, I thought, yes, I think I can do SRE. And the other thing I would have appreciated, I would have spent more time learning the cloud native tools and really be hands on, so I would feel more comfortable. But once you get this concept of SLO and working with the engineering mindset to an operational problem and start learning about concept of SLOs, I think you will not look back. I think it's a great story. That's what I feel.
I know there are probably a lot of people listening in right now at the beginning of their SLO journey, and this is a very intimidating journey. And I want to know, can you give them some advice? What do you think it's really important to know at the beginning?
Very true. I mean, it is definitely a hard journey. I think what worked for us, probably I can say about a little bit, start small. Think about SLO concepts and error budget concepts. Really learn about those concepts. Decide how you want to get started. Have socialized SLO concepts within the organization, right? Bring your stakeholders along with you. And then figure it out a small pilot where you would really try to implement a critical journey on an SLO around them. Once you do that, I think it helps you. And Google CRE helps us to navigate stakeholders, how to present the view around it. But I would start small on it. Once you have that small pilot project with the blueprint, with some of the best practices of SLO and error budget concept baked into it, the next thing you would get into is pick up the right tools, right? You need the right tools to achieve this scale of how do you implement SLOs. Frankly, I mean, in GCP, the 4 golden signals are available out of the box. So you could literally take those 4 golden signals and instrument those and build your SLA out of it. And Google has a product, Google Cloud Monitoring SLO APIs, to allow us to build SLOs out of those 4 golden signals. So we started doing that for the first pilot. It gave us a single view for our pilot. And then from that blueprint, we started replicating and moving other services to follow the things. And iteratively, we had all of our services managed through cloud monitoring. And we had a single view of all of our SLOs that were important to our stakeholders. And it became a overall organizational ecosystem that SRE manages and works through. And that's how I feel. If you start small and pick the right tools and have cloud monitoring SLO API as your tools behind it, I think it will help.
Thank you, Vipul, for sharing your personal story. That was really meaningful. I know that there are a lot of people listening in right now at the beginning of their SLO journey. Is there any advice that you would give somebody that's starting their SLO journey for the first time?
Definitely. I think at Equifax, SLO has been a journey for us. I would suggest start small. Really understand the SLO and the error budget concept. Because once you understand the concept, then you can decide on how to get started. I would advise research internally, bring your stakeholders along with you, and then identify a small pilot. Figure it out the critical journeys that goes along with the pilot and build the SLOs around them. Also, get some help from Google CRE, who can help you to navigate the SRE best practices on building SLOs. So that way, the blueprint that you're building is reused for other services. Once you have a pilot identified and you have defined your critical user journeys, which you want to define SLO around, the next topic is really about pick the right tools that supports that. And the beauty of GCP is they support golden signals out of the box with Google Cloud. So that makes building the SLO as soon as possible, because you can use 4 golden signals and start building your SLO. Once you get into the SLO, you can use Google Cloud Monitoring SLO APIs, which allows you to build SLOs, and then you get all your SLO in a single view. And I think with those 2 points, I feel it's a great start.
Thank you so much, Vipul, for taking the time to talk to me today and for sharing such a meaningful story of your SLO adoption at Equifax.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So next, let's take one example. Let's think about SLO monitoring for your GKE fleet. And what I want us to take a step back is to understand that the SLO monitoring functionality really does not depend on the underlying infrastructure that you are deploying. So within Google Cloud, we have out-of-the-box integration for every single platform available. So if you're using GKE or Compute Engine or App Engine or any other GCP product, you'll be able to create SLOs in that environment. We have built a curated out-of-the-box experience for the Anthos product as well. However, if you are have a multi-cloud deployment or running on-premise environments as well, if you're bringing in your metrics into the backend of cloud monitoring, we will be able to create and help you set up your SLOs with our API very easily on those environments as well, even if they are Kubernetes or virtual machines or other clouds. And when we talk about scale, SLO monitoring is really built on the scale of the entire GCP console backend for both monitoring and logging. This is the same backend that operates internal Google as well. And our SLO API is currently used internally at Google, but it's also used by our external cloud customers. Everything gets built with zero config from day one, and it gives you all of the observability. So there are a lot of the golden signal that Vipul mentioned. There are a lot of metrics that come in out of the box and get added to the product for you to be able to create your SLOs very easily. All of the functionality that we are talking about in terms of SLO monitoring at scale, both the UI and API, they are in general availability as of today, so we're really happy to make this functionality available to all of our customers. And in order to showcase the UI experience, Patrick Eaton, the engineering lead that has helped build the UI and the API for SLO monitoring, is going to give us a whirlwind tour of how to do SLO monitoring for your GKE environment. Take it away, Patrick.
Hello. Today, I would like to introduce you to the service-oriented monitoring and SLO monitoring features in GCP's cloud monitoring product. These features are currently in general availability. First, I want to draw your attention to the workspace selector in the upper left. A workspace is a concept that allows one to combine multiple projects into a single view. This is great for being able to view an entire fleet of services in a single pane of glass. Next, notice that we're in the monitoring menu and the services submenu of the cloud console. The first view you'll see in the services area is the service inventory or services overview page. On this page, we see a list of all of the microservices that have been detected or identified by the user. You can see that there's a number of different types of services that depends on the technology that's used to develop those services. We currently support GAE, Cloud Endpoints, Istio on GKE, Anthos Service Mesh, and what we're going to focus on today, GKE-based microservices. In order to understand these more, let's start by defining a GKE microservice. When we click Define Service, we see that the tray slides out with a list of all of the GKE entities that are in the workspace, including deployments, replica sets, Kubernetes services, namespaces, and so on. Depending on the model that your organization uses, any of these entities could be a microservice. Now, I know that the way that my organization works, deployments are what correspond to microservices. And I also know from discussions with my broader organization, including PM and Eng and operations, that the ad service is a service that requires particular attention. So we search for ad service and find out there's actually 2 of them running in our workspace. We'll select one of them, give them a name, click submit, and with that, we've created the first GKE-based microservice. Next, you can read more about best practices for monitoring services at the documentation link here, or you can move directly to creating a service level objective. Instead, we're going to go back to the inventory and notice that our new microservice appears in the inventory already. It includes the metadata labels that are used to define the microservice, including the project, the cluster name, CSM demo, and the deployment ad service. It also indicates that we don't have any SLOs or SLO-based alerts yet. If we click into the dashboard for the service itself, at the top of that, we see that the first piece of monitoring data is about SLOs. This is granted space at the top of the page because SLOs are one of the most valuable things for monitoring services. Now, we don't yet have any SLOs, so let's fix that by creating an SLO. Again, this describes the service that we're creating the SLO alert for. Some service types have default availability or latency metrics, but we're going to pick our own metric. Now, there are a number of metrics that are available out of the box for all users to define SLOs. For example, here's a list of container metrics that may be useful for defining SLOs. GCLBs also have a number of metrics which can be useful. As the developer of this app, however, I know that the thing that best reflects the performance of the ad service is the response latency metric. Based on discussions with PM and others, I know that customers are satisfied with the ad service when it responds in 30 milliseconds or less on any of the containers that are running that image. Once we describe the metric that we're going to use to evaluate the SLO, we can see a preview of how that metric is actually performing. And we can also guess that 30 milliseconds is actually a pretty aggressive target given the behavior of the system right now. To finish defining the SLO, we set the compliance period to be a calendar week and a performance goal of 90%. What that means is that 90% of all requests to the ad service need to finish in 30 milliseconds in order to be compliant. Finally, we give it a name, we click submit, and now we've created our first SLO. We can evaluate the SLO based on the historical behavior of the system, so we don't have to wait for history to accumulate. We can see that right now, the service level indicator, the metric, is running at about 95%, which is greater than our 90% target. We can also see that about half of the error budget is remaining for the week. If we expand the time selector out to a week, we can see that indeed, at the beginning of the week, the error budget resets and then trails off towards as the week progresses. Based on last week, it looks like we will run out of error budget. So there's probably some reliability work that needs to be done for this service. Notice also that there is a view to look at alerts, SLO-based alerts that are firing for this service. In order to create these, you can use this link here, and that alert can be created right in context. The SLO-based alerts are based on the concept of a fast burn alert, which means that the system can detect when the error budget is being burned at a rate that's not sustainable and such that the system can remain in compliance. If we look at other parts of the service dashboard, we can see that the metrics widget is interesting. It contains a lot of the out-of-the-box metrics that are available to users, arranged in a number of bundles. It's currently seeing the container metrics corresponding to CPU. We can also look at, for example, pod level metrics on network usage. We select that, and the charts update. We can see individual pods and the network usage on those. Alternatively, we could look at a node metric, such as CPU, to see what kind of capacity our cluster has. If we scroll down further, we can see the pods, the Kubernetes pods that make up this service. Here we see we have 5 pods running the ad service right now. All of them are ready and running, so they're healthy. For each of them, resource utilization is described. And under the snowman, we see a link to the Kubernetes Engine page. If we switch to the Kubernetes part of the Cloud Console, this is where we can see more information about the pod, including its events, its logs, and also take actions on the pod, such as restarting it. The last part of the service dashboard is the logs widget. This widget gives a brief overview of the logs that are being emitted by the microservice. If, however, we want to look at the logs in more detail, we can go to the logs viewer. Now, the interesting thing about pivoting to the logs viewer is that the context or the filter state for the microservice is preserved. You can see here that the filter by default goes to the cluster that we've been monitoring and the ad service. Even the timestamp filter is brought across to the logs viewer to preserve context. The logs viewer shows a histogram of log volume. It also facets it by severity. We can filter to errors, to the error severity, and very quickly get to the stack traces corresponding to our microservice. Now let's return to the idea of SLO-based alerts. If we go to the overview, we can see that there are 3 SLO-based alerts that are currently firing. If we filter to those services, we see that one of them is the default GKE namespace. Let's look at what a service level dashboard looks like when there are incidents firing. The thing you'll notice different is that now there is an alert timeline at the top. The timeline indicates when incidents are firing by the red bars on the timeline. If you hover on these bars, you see a summary of the corresponding alert, along with a link to get the alert details. The event timeline can also be, the alert timeline can also be used as a time selector. And when you select the time there, that also updates the time for all the charts and for all the log entries. You should also notice that this default microservice has 2 SLOs defined, so you can have more than one SLO defined for a single service. You can also have more than one alert defined for a single SLO. That completes a tour of the UI for service-oriented monitoring and SLOs. You should note that if you're interested in managing large numbers of services or SLOs, there is an API that's also available that allows access to all of these features. It has been my pleasure to introduce you to service-oriented monitoring concepts today in cloud monitoring. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for the insightful demo. I really appreciate the work that went into building the product and putting the demo together. I want to share also special thanks to the Equifax team that has been one of our lead users of SLO monitoring and many other GCP customers that are already using this product in production today. I want to also thank the CRE team, the Cloud Reliability Engineering team at Google, for using the SLO monitoring product as a best practice for adopting SRE best practices to our organizations. I'm really happy that the product is finally in general availability, and please give it a try. If you want to learn more about other cloud operations sessions and learn about all of the work that we're doing on cloud monitoring and cloud logging, these are the available talks. Thank you so much for your time.